Joining us for this informative session. We're all excited to hear the results of many years of Nicole's work, which every time I talk to her in the last year, what are you doing? Working on the organic standards revisions. So Nicole Boudreau is joining us today. She's the coordinator with Organic Federation of Canada. She is a biologist with a Bachelor in Science from University of Sherbrooke and a communicator with a Bachelor from McGill University. She's been involved in the organic sector since 2005, working as a market monitor for the CAR-TV, and has been employed by the Organic Federation of Canada for the past 10 years. She manages the Canadian Standards Interpretation Committee, and she co-administers the Organic Science Cluster 2 with the Organic Agriculture Centre of Canada. And as mentioned, she has been tirelessly working on the updating of the organic standards, which we are going to see the results of today. So we will pass the baton over to you, Nicole, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, and we will take questions at the end.
Share screen. Is that okay? Am I on mute?
No, you're not on mute, but we do not see your screen yet.
There we go. It's starting.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Thank you, Tia. I've been working with OFC for 13 years. I know time passes very quickly, but it's not 10, it's 13. We have 35 minutes approximately to present the changes to the standards. It's not a line-by-line presentation because it would be a 3-hour session, I believe. But okay. We believe the latest news is that CGSB will publish the standards later next week by November 26, if everything goes well. I know there are still a few things to do. We received a draft two days ago, and we're checking and checking again. And after we cannot publish the standard, it is because the CGSB owns the intellectual property. But as soon as the standards are officially published, we will publish a series of information. So you will have a side-by-side comparison of the 2015 and the 2020 standards line by line, and then you can see the changes. The changes will be highlighted. Also, on the standards, and the Standards Interpretation Committee is now revising all the final Q&As. It is a long page of Q&As that the Interpretation Committee has answered since 2009. So we are updating all the Q&As so that operators or traders, whoever, can, so you can see what is now the answers under the 2020 version of the standards. So you'll get plenty of information very soon. But now we'll present a few updates. So yeah, Tia explained what the Organic Federation do, the review, interpretation, managing the science cluster, and the Emma Meister is our scientific director. We've been working together since 2009, so and we are, I think we are a good team. Okay, so let's jump into the standards. So in the 2015 version, you had 1.4 prohibited substances, materials, techniques in organic production and preparation. So now you have more and more technologies and technology proposals. So 1.4 is divided into 2. So you have 1.4, again, prohibited materials or techniques in organic production and preparation. Inside the techniques prohibited, we had to include the CRISPR. There was a huge publicity around CRISPR. You know, CRISPR is the small, you know, when the bacteria is attacked by a virus, the bacteria cuts the DNA of the virus. It is a normal biological tool that microorganisms have, and also that our white cells, the white cells of our immune system have. So in a lab, they could reproduce these little gene clippers, but, and there was a huge discussion about, okay, is it still gene editing? And finally, the whole organic international community decided it is gene edition, and it will be prohibited under organic production systems. So we have 1.4, we have 1.5 prohibited substances. The substances in organic production, it's quite a similar list, except that you will see everywhere in the standards, we try to remove the word synthetic, because synthetic now, it is not false, but it could be misleading. For example, we use soap, but soap is synthetic. It's not something that you will find in nature. And we use soap in organic production. So in the PSN, in the permitted substances list, for example, you'll see that the word synthetic is, I think it remains under one substance. Also, for the big fans of inputs, there is a table that has been added in the standards to complete, to verify if an input is complying with the standards. So we won't go, we won't visit this table today. I think, but we worked very hard on this, and so if you have a substance, it depends on how it was produced, on which substrate, and you have to check with all the various annotations in the permitted substances list. So when you will have the standard, you will have the chance to visit this table, this decision tree. It will be very useful, I believe, for CBs, and we are very anxious to see how the sector will be able to work with this. It will need to be improved. It's a new device, a new tool that we are proposing. So let's go to the big changes. We have a change in parallel production. Parallel production is the simultaneous production of identical crops. So you wouldn't see, if you have a field of organic broccoli and at the same time a field of non-organic broccoli, you would not be able to distinguish visually what is the organic one and what is the non-organic one. So it is prohibited under one single operation in Canada, but it is allowed in United States. So in Canada, there has been a strong opposition to the introduction of parallel production, but at the same time, some producers were feeling they were at some type of disadvantage in comparison with American producers. So now there is a small flexibility inside parallel production. It is that you will be allowed to, if you are already in existing operation and that you are adding some additional fields to your operation that are non-organic and that have to be transitioned, you will be able to grow parallel crops inside the 2 last years of the transition. So it is there because it is for existing operations who are already more familiar, we believe, with handling organic crops. So it is a little opening. There are changes regarding environmental factors. Now you cannot use treated post for new installations or replacement purposes. In the 2015 versions, you could use treated posts if there was a commercial availability clause allowing you to use this if you would have no choice. But now in 2020, no treated post, but you can recycle treated post. Recycling is always important in organic production. There is also the introduction under seeds and planting stock, a detailed introduction of what is acceptable as a treated, primed, pelted, or coated seed in organic production. So these are all detailed. Obviously, it is with substances listed in the permitted substances list. And because non-organic seeds in organic production, if you cannot find any organic seeds for the crop you want to to plant. So if they are not commercially available, the seeds can be primed with substances non-listed in PSL, providing the priming does not contain pesticides not listed in PSL. So it needs some practices. And if you apply seeds treated with prohibited substances, land is back to a 3-year transition. So it is a delicate subject, but sometimes it's difficult to find organic seeds. But now the clauses are about seeds, and in the PSL also there are details about what you can do, how you can treat or primed or pelt seeds. So we hope the directives are clear enough. There is a new clause about protecting biodiversity because the protection of biodiversity has always been a huge principle in organic production, but now there is a clause, the clause 524, that will require that operator will demonstrate that they are protecting and enhancing the ecosystem health of their operation. So the producers, operators will have to show that they do something to protect biodiversity. For example, operator of a greenhouse on leased land can plant wildflowers around greenhouses. Or field crop producers can leave wild areas on their farms. I think a lot of field crop producers are already leaving wild areas on their farms, but they will have to show this to their certification body. So, it is a step forward to impose a clear practice on the farm that showing that biodiversity is protected. There are many changes to livestock. I am only showing you a few ones. Animal welfare is a huge issue, outdoor access. So in organic production, we always want to offer life to the livestock to the livestock on the farms. So it's the discussions inside the livestock working group have been quite intense. So I will show you a few of these. So and I think you will understand why. So there are a few changes about the origin of livestock. So when animals purchased for breeding shall be organic. However, non-organic animals brought into a milk production unit shall be non-lactating. And if there is a catastrophic event, you may bring in an organic operation, non-organic breeding stock before the last third of gestation if suitable organic animals are not commercially available. So these are there because sometimes if there is a catastrophic event or if you want to have more animals on your farm, it is difficult to find organic animals around. So there is an introduction of some flexibility to help enlarge your herd. Excuse me. About the livestock feed, now there is a possibility to use non-organic milk or non-organic milk replacer if there is a contagious disease on your farm in order to protect the whole herd. Or there is also in 6.4e, the calves may be fed milk from an organic cow that received treatment with antibiotics if a withholding period of twice the label requirement of 14 days, whichever is longer, is applied. This was done because usually it is 30 days. If a dairy cow is treated with antibiotics, you have to wait 30 days before taking back the milk into the organic production. But if it is for feeding veal, producers were saying that it is you throw away so much milk if you treat a cow. So it was a compromise to avoid getting rid of milk if a cow is treated. The need to test drinking water every year has been eliminated. Producers still have to care for the quality of the water, but there is not a specific need to test. Also, the pandemic had some influences here in 647, pardon me, when a catastrophic event, there is a catastrophic event such as fire, flood, non-organic feed may be used for a maximum of 10 consecutive days. That was in the 2015 standards. In the 2020 standards, it is for a maximum of 10 consecutive days or up to 30% non-organic feed for up to 30 days. So it is the same amount of non-organic feed that you would give to the livestock, but you have a longer time to find new providers because under the pandemics, some hoppers were closed and it was difficult for some producers to import feed for the livestock. And sometimes it could take more than 10 days to rebalance and to find new suppliers of feed. Also, if there is last sentence here, if there is a forage shortage, non-organic forage may comprise up to 25% of the forage ration for the entire ruminant herd. But the operator shall design a contingency plan to address future forage shortages. Again, this was introduced because climatic changes are there. We experienced some drought in the prairies in Quebec. So in order to give a chance to the producers to adapt to difficult conditions, this is one of the clauses that was introduced in the 2020 version. About dairy cattle housing, building new tie stalls is prohibited and the use is, it will be, excuse me, there's a word missing, COTA. In 2030, tie stalls won't be allowed in organic production. Even if you already had your barn, everything is fine, tie stalls will be prohibited. So 2030 will be the date, the final date for the disparition of tie stalls in organic dairy production. And from now on, electric traineries are prohibited. In 2015, there was, people discussed about the prohibition, but the producers were not ready. It was still the practice that was used. So there was a kind of flexibility that was still allowed, but for now on, 2020, no electric trainers. There are some changes to the maple syrup production as well. So one of the main ones is it is that any manipulation on maple syrup carried out in order to mask defects in flavor, mainly the body of flavor, is prohibited. It is that sometimes if you collect the sap late in the spring, the sap can have a taste. So the producers, they would take the sap and they will spill it over a height so that to oxygenate the sap and to help removing the bad flavor. But a few weeks later, the flavor is back anyway. So in order to protect the quality of organic syrup, maple syrup, this is prohibited. And also you cannot collect syrup in fall. I don't think it is a very implemented practices, but it is there. There are no change to organic insects. In fact, we didn't have time. But I'm very anxious to start talking about organic insects. How do you address outdoor access for insects? How do you encourage natural behaviors? So it is still a mystery to me, but I hope that if in the 2025 version, we will be able to talk about insects, because insects are more and more usual in feed and in people food. One of the major changes about animal welfare is for poultry. So now, from now on, the outdoor areas shall have effective overhead cover for shade and protection from avian predators distributed throughout the range area of barn-raised birds to encourage continual use by the birds. So there was a strong movement to encourage poultry to go outdoors and making overhead cover a requirement and distributed throughout the range is a first step. This cover may be natural, such as trees, shrubs, and crops, or artificial, so such as shade clothes, camouflage, netting, screens, or trailers. There are other details about the overhead cover. It would be long to cover, but it is now implemented in the 2020 standards, and as well as the requirement for what is called an enriched veranda. So you see a picture of what on the right here of what is an enriched veranda. It comes from a Quebec farm from Serge Lefebvre, not to say the name. So this veranda that you see, it is not complete yet because uh, but as soon as this new clause was voted by the technical committee, Mr. Lefebvre started building this. So the enriched veranda is a covered, uninsulated, unheated extension to a poultry barn, and it shall be used when barn or raised layers do not have access to outdoor runs because of weather or disease constraints. The enriched veranda shall represent at least 1/3 of the footprint of the indoor barn area. So it's not such a little piece that you add to your barn. It is 1/3 of the size. The floor will be sand, dirt, or solid floor covered with bedding to encourage foraging, scratching, and dust bathing behaviors. And the enriched veranda will offer enrichments. Example include perches, trays of greens, hay bales, pecking objects to encourage natural behaviors. So on the picture that you see, you're missing pecking objects, hay bales. I'm sure it is there. Maybe I would add for another picture. And the area of the enriched veranda doesn't count towards indoor or outdoor space allowance. So producers, there were a lot of discussions around that because it represents a cost to producers to build and enriched veranda. But if you already can demonstrate that your birds go outdoors, and you can show pictures, you can you can have an exemption. And also there are a lot of additional clauses about, okay, if you already have the minimal space for in the indoor minimal space and the outdoor minimal space, how do you manage your veranda? So all these conditions are detailed in the standards. One other issue that was intensively discussed was about the meat chicken. As we know, in the standard, meat chickens, they have to have outdoor access on a daily basis, at least at 25 days of age, when there are no weather constraints. Operators shall take measures to increase use of the pastures and outside exercise areas and have a goal of a minimum of 15% of birds on range when there are weather constraints. The problem with meat chickens is that if before 25 days of age, they are babies, very young, and they are vaccinated. So when they are vaccinated, they can stay inside. But they are slaughtered at 40 days. So it only gives 50, like around 15 days to train the birds and to show them, look, go outdoors, it's nice. And producers say their birds go out, but there were many inspectors on the livestock working group, and inspectors were saying, well, when I visit poultry barns, I never see the meat birds outdoors. So it was intense, so much that now there is a note completing this clause, describing potential measures for increasing the use of pasture, outdoor range, and outside exercise areas for meat birds. For example, use slower growing foraging breeds. Use a ration that has been nutritionally adjusted for slower growth. Implement an older slaughter age, provided the health of the birds can be maintained. Allow other access before the minimum age specified. Provide mobile units or effective overhead cover. As we already know, pasture enrichment, improve pasture access. As you can see, this note, the big discussion was to have this note as a clause. A note is not enforceable. It is a recommendation, if we may say. There's a potential that in the 2025 review, the note will become a clause. But anyway, it's not done because you can imagine that if you use slower growing breeds, maybe you will slaughter these breeds at 60 days of age, and the cost of production will raise. So these are difficult choices, but animal welfare is animal welfare. In livestock production, there is also another change in regarding the permitted substances list. Because we all know that in organic production, you cannot use genetically engineered plants or any GMOs in feed and for forage. But GE technology is now so widespread and adapted by the livestock, feed, and veterinary industries that it has become almost impossible to find certain supplements or vaccines that are manufactured without the use of genetic engineering. So in the permitted substances list now, there are exceptions for essential amino acids such as lysine and methionine, phytase, and the enzyme that breaks down phytate phosphorus in pig production, vaccines to prevent deadly diseases in livestock, and vitamins for animals and human consumption. So for these substances, vitamins, vaccines, and amino acids, when there is no alternative and the substance is required, organic farmers can use forms of these substances that were made from or contain residues from genetic engineered products. So it is again a difficult decision, but for example, because we don't want to give medication to livestock, vaccine is one of the main prevention tools that organic producers may use. But if you don't find vaccines that are complying with the standard, what do you do? The same with lysine, methionine. So we'll see where it goes. We hope that the organic industry will become larger and that the industry, the veterinary industries will consider manufacturing amino acids and vaccines and vitamins that are complying with the standards. But for now, we don't have our industry is not big enough to motivate such products. Another one of the other big discussions was about honey. Now, time is flying. There was a huge discussion about honey feeding. Honey feeding is usually when bees live in nature, they just they produce honey, and then when it is wintertime, they live on their reserves of honey throughout the winter. But the clauses in our standard, there in the apiculture section, there was a clause stating that in the event of a feed forage due to climatic or other exceptional circumstances, temporary feeding of colonies is permitted. When we revised this, and we had to revise this, I won't tell the whole story, but we discovered that in Canada, the beekeepers consider that winter is an exceptional circumstance, and that they should be allowed to feed the bees every winter. Feeding the bees every winter means to give them sugar or to give them honey from another apiculture operation. So the discussions have been very intense because is winter in Canada exceptional or not? And can we allow feeding every winter for bees? And we all know that now the bees are very vulnerable due to climatic conditions and extensive agriculture and industrialization of agriculture. So in the 2020 standard, there is a type of compromise stating that bees may be fed organic honey, organic sugar, even non-organic sugar for winter feeding, as well as in the event of a regional or seasonal shortage of forage. So feeding the bees every winter will be allowed. One of the non-organic sugar thing was also some members of the working groups would say that non-organic sugar is so pure, so refined that if the bees would ingest this non-organic sugar during winter, there are no intestinal residues and less intestinal diseases. Who knows? We don't know. We need studies. The other fact is also, a lot of honey producers are in the up north area where there are no field crops and GE crops production. And so they need to be isolated. They need a 3-kilometer buffer zone. So they are up north where obviously winters are longer than in the south of Ontario. So it will be back to the 2025 review. We hope to have more information because I would say nobody was happy with this. On either side were people satisfied. It is a compromise. Sprouts, shoots, and microgreens. The other big discussion there was on the organic production was about artificial lighting in crop production. So there was a request to allow artificial lighting for greenhouse production, strictly artificial lighting. So finally, it would not be what we call a greenhouse, but a factory farm. You know, people, they buy old buildings and they plant crops and they grow with artificial light. So there was a proposal to allow 100% artificial lighting in greenhouse. It was adopted by the technical committee, and then it was submitted to public comment. And then the public comment was, the response from the public was huge. We collected a petition of 11,000 names rejecting 100% artificial lighting in greenhouse production. So we still have clause 754, sunlight shall be the primary source of light for photosynthesis in all crops covered in clause 7.5. Supplemental lighting may be used. So it's the reason why up here in 7.4, we had to specify that artificial lighting is permitted to supplement or replace natural light in sprouts, shoots, and microgreen productions. Just a reminder that under greenhouse, artificial lighting would have been allowed for crops under 60 that are harvested before 60 days. And also, the greenhouse section is now renamed crops grown in structures or containers, because now you have different devices and type of tunnels, and so it had this section had to include all the new type of structures that people are imagining and building. So photosynthetic area was defined in order to talk about the soil volume. So you have new directives about the crops. The soil required will be dependent on the crop size, on the growth rate, on the cycle of the crops. And also you have distinct soil requirements for containerized, semi-indeterminate, and indeterminate staked crops. So lot of nice details, but it is clearer. And in greenhouse crops, if for crops harvested within 30 days of imbibition, organic seed shall be used. Organic seed have to be used when you grow sprout, shoots, and microgreens. So, and usually sprouts, shoots, and microgreens are 30 days or shorter. So it is the same requirement if you grow in a greenhouse. So you need organic seed. No commercial availability clause here. It is an organic seed or nothing at all. So change because in January 2021, we will the organic aquaculture standard, can CGSB 3032, will be enforceable. So it will affect some the wild crop section of the agricultural standard. So the seaweed meal, it was certified under section 7.6 wild crops when it is used for food and livestock feed, but after January, you will have to learn the organic aquaculture standard. A lot of fun, but there are similar clauses. The general clauses are a little similar. Also, if you are a processor of food, we won't do the algebra today. I think Kelly is on the line. Kelly, maybe Kelly would talk an hour about the calculation of there's a lot of confusion about how you calculate the percentage of the product organic composition when you add water before, and when water is added to an ingredient that you buy from an outside supplier. So there is a sentence that is added that any user of an ingredient to which water or salt has been added by a prior processor and is declared as water of salt or salt ingredient declaration of the finished product is required to exclude this added water or salt when calculating organic percentages. So take back your little calculators, and because we hope it will erase the confusion that was about the calculation of water ingredients, and Kelly is the expert. The permitted substances list. In the 2015 standard, we had two tables for crop production, tables 4.2, 4.3, one for table 424 for soil amendment, table 43 for production aids. Now we have one single table that you can see here. So it is a big table, and on the right you can see if the substance, there are two columns, you can see if the substance can be used as a soil amendment or as a production aid, or sometimes for both uses. There is also a new substance that we have added to the PSL in crop production, the use of Struvite. So it is Struvite now can be used in order to provide more phosphorus on organic farms, but not Struvite from human urine. Because as with sewage sludge, which is also prohibited, there are concerns over contamination by pharmaceuticals, harsh cleansers, and other substances flushed in the sewage stream. There is actually a research under the Organic Science Cluster 3 led by Dr. Kimberly Schneider that you see here. She is testing Struvite on alfalfa crops with marten ants. So we are very anxious to see the results of this study. There was a lot of discussion also under the review to talk about fairness, the introduction of the fairness principle in the Canadian Organic Standards. You know, we had a fairness working group, but finally, because in the standard we promote fairness, in the Canadian Organic Standards we promote the fairness principle, but it is not described. It is not particularly detailed. So we decided to add it as add this as an annex at the end of the standard. And we know it will be back to the 2025 production revision of the standards, because the fairness principle, it really insists on human relationships on the farm, uh, uh, considering the working conditions of farmers, workers, processors, traders, providing a good quality of life to farm employees. So it is a big step forward, because so far we were insisting on animal welfare, but now to add clauses about human welfare, if I may call it like this. But it is now an annex. It is not enforceable, but we know for sure that it will be back to the 2025 round of discussion. So I presented the big changes. I would just like to inform you that there will be a post-mortem to the review process. The review has lasted 2 years. These years were very intense, and we have to refine the standard review process, make it better all the time. So because for example, what we face is that how do we define organic agriculture? Do we want it to be a grassroots sector with basic organic principles, or do we want to expand, integrate new technologies? Do we aim to feed the planet or fill a niche market? Should the cost of production be considered, as it is actually under the NOP? Should the Canadian standards be closer to the NOP standards in order to help Canadian producers compete in North American markets? Also, I would add the working group compositions. We had some working groups with 30, 40 participants. So how do we balance the equilibrium representing all angles of the industry? If do we have big producers, or do we have small scale? And because the vision of organic agriculture is sometimes different depending on the level of production that you have. So stay tuned, because we will run a survey. Because as soon as the 2020 standards are published, we will have to start thinking about the next one, finding the money, and organizing the working groups, and making it the better process, the best process. Okay, so just publicity for the science cluster. OFC is managing with OECC the science cluster. We have a magazine, we have podcast, and yeah. So, and we try to have research that helps the revision of the standards, because we lack information. For example, when we revised the honeys clause, we miss information about the health of bees. Struvite, the researcher that is making the study on struvite, she says that we would be able to use human urine, because when they precipitate the phosphorus from the sewage, it is not contaminated. It is a pure phosphorus that would not contain residues of medication. So it's fun to manage science research and the standard review at the same time, to complement the other activities together. Do you have questions?